think we've got a critical mass here. People, I'm sure, will keep on joining. So let me just go back to my screen. Oh, Stefano, you're in Paris. All right. Lucky you. Okay, now I've lost my screen. So everyone hang for a minute. And I'm going to push this down. All right, great. Well, welcome everybody to our briefing today for our Global Life Sciences Healthcare Entrepreneurship Course, our virtual masterclass direct from Silicon Valley. And even better, we're going to start off with a talk on how to start a startup. So I am Stephanie Maris, Managing Director of Entrepreneurship at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. I presume most of you know who we are, but I'll do a quick review in a bit. And welcome to this hour that we're going to have together. I am now trying to get my slide to, okay. So yeah, very quickly, for anyone who's not familiar with us, UCSF is a global scientific and medical powerhouse. We have 7 Nobel laureates. We have a top hospital system. We are actually the birthplace of biotech. For those of you who know Genentech, the first biotechnology company that was formed in 1976. That's because one of our faculty members hooked up with one of the earliest VCs and they created a company. We are ranked number 16 globally of all universities, which, given that fact that we are just a graduate school and only do life sciences and healthcare, is pretty amazing statistic. So I'm very proud to be part of this university. I'm now going to start by introducing David Hanzel. Dave is someone I've known for a long time. He's a superb teacher, and he comes from a UC Berkeley PhD background with a postdoc at my alma mater, Cornell University. He has had many roles. He is and has been a venture investor. He's an angel investor. He's an entrepreneur. He's been in many companies in C-suite positions, CEO, CSO, which is scientific officer, COO, which is operating officer, and the list goes on. He is very wise and a really great teacher. So I'm very excited to hand this stage over to Dave, who's going to kick things off today. Dave, you should be able to share your slides now because I've stopped my share. Excellent.
Okay.
You did
Is
it
that
quickly.
working?
It is. It's excellent.
All right.
And Dave, tell people where you are.
Sure. So Stephanie asked, so I'm actually in an RV in Seattle, Washington. I'm driving around the country, which is what I do when I'm not in the lab. So thanks, Stephanie. I'm first and foremost a scientist, but I got my first paid science job at UCSF very long ago as a dishwasher. Since my postdoc, I've been a commercial scientist. I went straight into industry and have had a wonderful time. An inventor, but I was also a full general equity partner in VC for 12 years, made money, lost money, and I'm now back on back at the bench. But the reason I'm doing this is I think I really like the karma of the community of supporting entrepreneurial science, especially in biotech. This class, or this is a life sciences and healthcare class, so I'm going to do most of my examples, starting with assuming sort of an academic-based science that wants to translate into a company. I looked at the students, and most of you fit in that one. This class is about building successful companies, right? And why companies? Because everything that touches a patient, other than a person, is made by companies. The beds are made by companies, medicines are made by companies, diagnostics are made by companies, right? Universities and governments don't usually make things. They're really good at teaching us how to do science, less good about the business end, unless you are an MBA. And I saw there's a couple MBAs in this in this meeting. So we're going to be less about the science on this particular class. This is, I'm trying to sell you on taking Stephanie's class. I've been teaching and doing this sort of stuff for a decade, and I have strong opinions about it. But we're here to help you be as successful as possible. Okay. And so I've made lots of mistakes. Now, one of my goals in life, and you can adopt it or not, is to endeavor to only make original mistakes. Now, this is going to come back a lot of times in my talk. It's easy to make unoriginal mistakes. A real competitive value advantage that you'll have is if you only make original mistakes. And I'll give you an example of one. One company ago, I was a chief scientific officer of a probiotic company for the face, so live biological product. We had been working for a couple of years, taking an idea and a patent from UCLA, working through the FDA. We had a 2-year relationship with our sort of research chairman, our interaction person at the FDA. We filed our IND for the phase 1A. We did a dose escalation study, putting our bacteria on people's faces. Everything was going great. Go back, finish that, write up the IND. This is a massive form you send to the FDA. We sent it to the FDA, and like in 48 hours, I get this nice note back. Dear David Hanzel, thank you so much for your submission. It has been assigned this number, blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, your research manager is on vacation this week. And so your project, your application has been assigned to Dr. Diana X. And it's like, I have a 2-year relationship with this person. They answer my emails. They understand our thinking. And because I failed to look up to see what their vacation schedule was, I got to start from scratch. So I've been trying to find more original ones. That's a truly original mistake. I'm telling this to you so you never make that mistake. But that is the deal. And the way that you avoid making unoriginal mistakes is by learning and talking to people and thinking about that. So that's really a lot of what this class is about. One of the things that comes up, one of the first decisions, right? You can only make a mistake if you have a decision, is like, when do you leave the lab, right? There's the stock answer that the time to leave the lab and start a company is when you'll make progress towards the value of the company faster outside the lab than inside the lab. Now, in the lab, you've got all the university's equipment and all that capital stuff. And it's actually just a small part. The science is a small part, and that's going to be another theme in the next 15 minutes or so. There's a couple other things that are really, really important. But when I mean the company will proceed faster, that is, it's going to create value-creating milestones, which are some scientific and many of them are not. So what is the main reason startups? 95% of startups fail. In my last fund, we had 18 companies. One paid for the entire portfolio. We had 3 that we sold, but most of them fail, no matter how we do it. And why do they fail? They fail because you're making something that people don't want to pay for, right? And it turns out we spend all our time thinking about the science and the disease and the pathology and animal response, and there's this whole company thing. And building the company is really, really important. I personally define a company failing as not returning capital to the original investors. There's a parallel universe, because I'm assuming that a lot of you are going to try and get venture money. An important thing that you're going to get in the class is that most companies never actually get venture money. You can be a successful company, never get venture money. So I live in Silicon Valley. I live in Palo Alto. So we always think about venture, and that's sort of the classic way to think about it. But that's not as important. What I want to leave you with sort of at this point is that the marketing, and it's a kind of a weird name, but it's actually a fantastic thing, is just as important as the science. And in this wonderful parallel world, you can treat marketing, which is figuring out where does your product fit, where's the most value, how can you improve patient outcomes and lower costs. Think of marketing just like science. You have a hypothesis. I believe that people in rest homes will need this diagnostic. Then, just like science, you collect data that speaks to that your hypothesis. You go and ask a bunch of rest homes, do they need this or not, right? And then the hard part for most CEOs is actually to believe the data. Because we all come into this with this idea that this customer is going to buy this product for this reason, and half the time it's wrong. So actually spend a significant amount of time on marketing. And I'll come back to that again in a minute. Okay. Next sort of lesson, it's one of my favorites, is 6 months in the lab will save a whole afternoon in the library. Yeah, I know. We don't go to libraries anymore. We use Google, but you get the point. It's really, this is both figurative and literally, but it's really hard as an investor to pay somebody to do science or optimize a process that's already been done. It's already published. It's a waste of everybody's time and money. And that's true about pretty much everything. And this little tag, ROI is greater than region of interest. In graduate school and postdoc, and actually the first 5 years of industry, I was building microscopes, using microscopes, having a great time. But this is not really a joke, because science and business are very, very complementary, right? If you want to build a company, it's really optimal to have some science and some business. My most successful venture, the one that paid off, Stephanie knows what it is. It's the one that paid off our entire first fund, started with a PhD out of Cornell. Cornell Ithaca, not Cornell Med, where I was, and an MBA student. And the two of them, and that works really well. It's often, we try whenever we can to get a business person, somebody with business experience. Doesn't have to be an MBA. They could have worked in a company for decades or 5 years and something, but somebody who thinks about the business as much as they do about the science and how you're going to fit in, who the customer is, what the value proposition is. This is one of my favorite talks in this class, in Stephanie's class. We spend a lot of time on that because it's really important for not failing. Okay. That also is the team. So yeah, you're going to have some science and business, but depending on what you're doing, manufacturing might be super important. You might really need that expertise. Or you're doing some weird regulatory thing with the FDA, or you have a hook for reimbursement, right? If you're building something where there's already automatically, it gets paid for by insurance companies and things like that, that makes life way easier. So there's a bunch of different things like that. If you get your team together with that expertise, it can be very helpful. The other thing about startups is, like, there's no work-life balance. Get over that. You are likely going to be spending more time with your startup team than you are with your family. So life is way better if you like the people and if you trust the people you're working with. So one of my first CEOs that I worked with extensively at PacBio, I was employee 6, he beat into us that the most important thing that you do as an executive is hiring. You spend the time, call the references. Calling the reference, really, really important. I've been involved with 2 companies, one of my last one, where there was significant embezzlement. So when I was halfway through my phase 1B, and the CEO came and said, David, we have no more capital. And I said, well, of course we do. We got like $1.5 million. Oh, no, it was embezzled. So take the time. That would not be an original mistake. It turned out it happens all the time. So take the time to actually get to know and choose the people. Super important to do that. Okay, next. Oh, here we go. Okay. The FDA is always right. So you remember my very first original mistake. So Diana is my new program director, and has a different training than Matt. And so she comes back, and so we've done our phase 1A, shown safety, we have a product, everything's fine. All we're going to do is a phase 1B, where we're going to do it instead of once, we're going to do it for 12 weeks, right? And we're going to, at the highest dose, everything's fine. She said, oh, no, I was rereading all your protocols. And you have to now pass USP 61 and USP 62. Excuse me? We've never done this before. I read them. I said, that's not appropriate. Well, it turns out the FDA is always right. And you can argue with them, but it's not going to do any good. And to be honest, after years and years of working with regulators, I get along fine with regulators. When they slap my wrist and say, bad David, you should do this, they're all right. It's never really been a problem. So I don't really have a problem with that at all. Now, this is sort of a pet peeve of mine. So I live in Palo Alto, where most of my friends are making software, they're making semiconductors, they're building electric cars, they're doing things like that. And they do a lot of A/B testing, they try things. We're not doing that, right? In healthcare, there is no minimum viable product that you get it out there and you try it, and if it doesn't work, right, you do a new one. It's a really important thing that we're doing, but the best part about it is it's incredibly rewarding when it works. I've had a great career in this space. It's totally worth the effort. And this class, this global entrepreneurship class, is really all about helping you be successful and learning from our mistakes. And that I'm right about on time. And I may have time for one question or something.
I'm sure you have time for one question. If there's anyone who has a question there, let's see. I'm looking at the chat. You can put your question in the chat or, well, everybody, it's nice to see there are people from Europe, Barcelona, London, Barcelona, Finland, Paris. Okay, do I see any hands up? Okay, and Neil Kumar, go for it.
Hi, David. As you mentioned, the success rate is really high, but is it true that the success rate for the second time or third time founders is high, and what the first timers can do to have that kind of success rate, or the second or third timers?
Great question. So Neil, what I meant was 95% fail of the best ones. So the success rate is very, very low. Well, I think that's low, but that's true for most startups. So, less than 5%. The reason repeat entrepreneurs often do better is if they've been successful, they have a track record. So one of the risks as a investor, I look at technical risk. Can they do what they want? I look at market risk. But the third and most important one is the entrepreneur risk. And so if somebody has already made money for investors, it's going to be way easier for them to raise money. So they have a competitive advantage there. They've also hopefully learned something in the process. So yes, repeat. But you know what? Most people have to be a first-time entrepreneur once. So it's really hard to get it. But thanks for the question, Anil.
Great, very good question. Thank you, Anil. Okay, okay. Yeah, we'll take one
Bye,
more.
Stephanie.
I'll
Bye,
take
everybody.
Alessandro. Alessandro, why don't you ask it out loud? Alessandro? Maybe she doesn't want to.
Oh, wait, is that in?
But it's
here we go. Yeah, is this one? How much should I ask for seed funding?
no, this is
Okay.
from
me.
Alessandro. Is it worth this for a scientific PhD founder to also get an MBA if he or she wants to be the CEO of a startup?
My short answer is no. Many of I know lots of people who've, when they weren't successful starting a company or running a company, decided to go get an MBA. If you go to, a Harvard or a Stanford, the MBA gives you a vocabulary, but more importantly, it gives you a Rolodex. So you're in, and so people will answer your emails because you can then email anybody who is an alum of your business school. I have not, but I did take a sales training class. I've been, I joined a pre-IPO startup directly out of my postdoc, and so got to see that. And I was always interested in the business of it, and like, why do people buy stuff? Why do people buy the things? And it's really an amazing thing. So, if you want to, and you really, really like going to school, and let's face it, most of us do really like going to school, then go right ahead. But unless you go to a Rolodex worthy business school, I don't think it's worth it. It's better, but that's just me. There's nothing special and secret from an MBA. It's a lot easier for a scientist to learn business than for a business person to learn the science. And you both are going to have to do that.
Great. Okay, well, time to move on. David, thank you
Bye,
so
all.
much. Thank you for coming and making time for us. And it's always a pleasure to have you involved with the class.
Thanks, Stephanie.
See you soon. Stay connected. Great. So now that we've heard from Dave, and Dave has been one of our faculty members from the start of this class, he's a wonderful resource. I want to tell you about the class, and then we have a student participant who's going to be doing Q&A with you at the end of this. So let me give you the brief overview of what this class is about. A great business term, our value proposition. Value proposition means what value are you offering? So ours is an entrepreneurship class where professionals learn about science and medical startup businesses from Silicon Valley practitioners and become part of a global community. And I'll unpack all this as we proceed. If I can get my slides to proceed, which, hang on. Okay, great. So who am I? I told you I head the entrepreneurship program at UCSF. I also have the title of senior lecturer at UCSF. I do love teaching. I come from an industry background. I'm not an academic. I've been in life sciences for a long time. I've had what we call C-suite roles, CEO, COO, which is operating officer, CBO, chief business officer. So I come to this class from the viewpoint of someone who has done it and has been in industry. The companies I've worked for have been both early and mid-stage, or 2 mid-stage companies. I've never worked for a huge Genentech or a BMS. So my mindset is in the space that we're all in. And I have been a grant reviewer at the NIH and NSF. I actually published in Nature on entrepreneurship, not on science, but I'm very proud of that. I'm in the Fulbright program. I'm a speaker for the US State Department, and I do have an MBA from Wharton. I have to agree, it's harder to learn the science. I agree with Dave, probably the other way around. This is from one of our participants a while ago who talked, and many people have told me this, that this has been a life-changing experience. So the class really has a great value if you are thinking about your life and what you're doing for a career and you're interested in entrepreneurship. So how are we different than other courses that are offered? First of all, we are purely life sciences and healthcare. So there are a lot of general entrepreneurship classes out there. This one is not general. This is very specific to our industry, and there is a deep difference. Let's start with the FDA and reimbursement. How do you get your product reimbursed by insurers? And so intellectual property, which is absolutely critical for us. We're very different than tech and then every place else. Another way we're different is we bring Silicon Valley out to the world, basically, because we have the practitioners, again, not the academics, but the people who are actually doing this work day to day. They're the ones who teach and mentor in the class. And here in the Valley, we have a philosophy of paying it forward. So these people have been very successful in what they do, and they want to not give back, but pay it forward to the next group of entrepreneurs who are going to follow them. The course is very high touch. We want it to be interactive. The lectures are interactive. We have small groups as well. We also have office hours. There are lots of ways to connect. There are meetups after class, meetups with other alums. So it's a way to get connected to a community. We bring you the mindset and culture of Silicon Valley. And we have quite a unique mindset here, as many of you know, which is why we've been so successful, we generally. It's different than the mindset and culture of much of Europe and Asia and pick another part of the world, we are the leading entrepreneurial ecosystem in the world, and we can bring that to you by having you participate in this class. And we also have a very active global alumni network. So I was just at BIO, the industry organization, at their annual meeting in San Diego, and we had a dinner for the alumni who were in San Diego. So we stay connected throughout the year, and there's a great benefit in terms of making connections and having a network that you can rely on. So why should you take this class? Well, maybe you're currently working on a startup or you're thinking about it, and this is going to give you a lot of guidance about how to proceed and what it's all about. That's probably the most frequent reason we hear when we see that people are taking the class. It's a very compact way to learn the essentials of business. And as Dave just said, business essentials are absolutely critical. So I think he placed it as, half of the weight of a company is science, half business. I might even argue that it's 3/4 business, because without business, you can't possibly be successful. And this is a class that will bring you the essentials, because if you are a scientist, you probably have never had this exposure. And it's very compelling. It will also help you assess your fit with a startup mentality. So not everybody should be an entrepreneur. Some people are just more comfortable in, let's say, a big company where you know what's going to happen every day. You are certain what your role is. You don't have to deal with surprises. Whereas in a startup, things can be very chaotic. Everything can be new. Things can change on a dime. The FDA tells you something, and all of a sudden, your work of the past 2 years is out the window. There is a lot that's different about a startup, and that's the topic of a whole different lecture. But just suffice to say that by participating in this class, you will get it. You will understand what it takes to do a startup. You will also find out how you can interest investors, because in our business, without investment, you really can't get very far. So unlike tech, where you can probably sit in your living room and build something that maybe has traction out there, it didn't cost you anything but your time. In life sciences, there are a lot of costs, and they're big costs. So you're going to have to bring in outside investment of some sort, whether it's venture capital or friends and family, or a whole number of other mechanisms for getting money into a venture. You will absorb the startup culture here in Silicon Valley. We talked a bit about that, because just by listening to people and interacting with them, people who come to teach in this class and mentor, you will start to understand what it takes. And then you will be building connections in the global community. So for those of you who are outside the US, you may be wanting to make connections in the United States, market access. For those of you who are already here, you will have an introduction to people outside wherever your community is, and it's very powerful to be able to access people from all over the world. Okay, who takes this course? All kinds of different people. So clearly entrepreneurs and potential founders, entrepreneurs, academics, people who are sitting right now in a place like UCSF and are thinking maybe they want to try something different. Maybe they want to see the impact of their research. I love Dave's phrase about everything that touches a person is made by a company. I think people are generally aware of that, but if you're in an academic lab, you may not be thinking a lot about it. And this will give you the ability to decide how to have impact if you want it. Scientific researchers in companies, physicians, ecosystem managers, people who are running tech transfer, people who are running an innovation group or an accelerator, an incubator, all kinds of efforts around the world, which is really cool to see them all burgeoning. Corporate managers, we've had a number of people from pharma join. They just want to understand innovation and how we do it. They're in big companies. They don't get a good sense of this. pharma executives, startup advisors, consultants, government people, and investors. So it's been quite a diverse group in a very exciting way. And this is actually Cecilia Sui, who is in Hong Kong. She is an innovation manager in my category, founder and executive director of the Innovation Forum. And her viewpoint is that she recommends this class to anyone who wants to understand how we operate in Silicon Valley. Cecilia, just as a little side story, used to get up at 1 a.m. so that she could attend the class live, even though we record all the lectures. She just wanted to be there live for the half of classes that are more convenient for Europe than for Asia. And she would set her alarm, get up, have a coffee, and then be in class. So I really, really thought that was quite impressionable that she valued being there live. Sorry, I didn't mean to pass that quickly. So I've lost the ability to see who's watching, so I'm trying to find it. Let's see. Okay, I've got it back. Just a very quick review of the different topics. And by the way, as I go along, please put your questions in the chat because we're going to have time for Q&A and would like to be able to call on you or read the question. So the first topic, which is perhaps the most important, is opportunity analysis. How do you know if this scientific idea you have or even scientific experiments you've got can be a business? And the two things are really different. So you can have like some really amazing science that everybody's very excited about, but for a variety of reasons, the market, the payers, the users, it's not going to be a business. And to help you understand that from the beginning is really important. It's going to save you a ton of time. It's going to save you frustration. It is essential. If you find out your wonderful science really can't be a business, then you can move on to do something else if you want to be an entrepreneur. So this very super important first lecture is given by Darren Cook, who is a member of a major angel network. He also is at the UC Berkeley Accelerator, and he runs programs at UC Berkeley, entrepreneurship programs. Okay. So I get to give the second lecture, which is on business models. Again, absolutely critical. How do you make money? If you can't make money out of something, you're not going to have investors. If you want to be a nonprofit, that's a whole different set of considerations and not one that we deal with. We want to help you create a for-profit company. And business models, the way that you make money, you have a lot of choices, and we're going to discuss what those are. We have a very special guest lecturer. I think some of you must know Steve Blank, who is credited with the start of the Lean Launchpad movement. I'll call it a movement because so many institutions have now adopted this, including the NSF, National Science Foundation, and NIH. We, UCSF, and I specifically worked with Steve to create a version of his customer discovery for our business, life sciences and healthcare, and that's now been adopted by the NIH. So Steve is always a great hit and very passionate about this really critical way to determine whether you can have a business, not just a science project. Team building, again, really important. This is what investors want to know. They want to know who's on the team, who's going to take this forward, who's going to be there when things get tough and when things don't work out, who is going to be able to make the decisions that can move the company away from a pothole into a promising new direction. It's the team. And Teresa Toller has worked for a number of venture capitalists building teams for their portfolio companies. And every once in a while, she pops into a company herself. Right now, she's head of people for a new therapeutics venture. She is an incredibly knowledgeable resource about how to build your initial team and what you're going to need going forward. Intellectual property. Todd Esker, who is a JD and a scientist, works for an intellectual property law firm in Silicon Valley. It has a way of explaining this extremely complicated landscape in a way that normal people can understand, meaning non-lawyers. So he is going to be doing the lecture on IP and is going to help us all understand what it takes to protect what you've got, which is, again, in life sciences, absolutely critical. FDA regulatory, well, we have to know how those guys work. Because again, they are the gatekeeper for anything ever making it to market. And while you may think, well, I don't have to worry about it because I'm just here to get this thing started, everyone else who might invest in your company is going to be looking very hard at what's the pathway. And if it's a very complicated pathway or uncertain, that's not going to be a plus for your venture. So we have a former FDA deputy director and who is currently at J&J as global regulatory leader. Ilan Irony is going to explain it all. All right, now we get to investors. We have angels. These are people who will invest before the VCs at an earlier stage company. And we have two different perspectives. Winnie Wan has sort of done it all. She is in Life Science Angels as well. She's a board director, executive advisor, and mentor. And she's going to talk about investment from her standpoint. She's also an angel investor. And Ranjan Nag, who does many things. He is an investor as well and teaches at Stanford, has his own family foundation. He's going to bring you the perspective of the MIT Alumni Angels. He runs that group in Northern California as an MIT alum. This group is open for people who are non-MIT to pitch to them, so they're a resource, and he's got a very interesting perspective as well. And then we'll go to venture capital. Venture capital, everybody thinks, well, all I need to do is raise $30 million from VCs and I'm set. Well, it's not quite that easy. And it's actually quite unrealistic. Jorge Candy, who is a general partner of one of the hottest VC firms in the world, Silicon Valley for sure, Andreessen Horowitz, is also a great teacher, and he's going to be telling us about venture capital. And we will probably pair him with another VC so that you have two perspectives. Partnering. So again, because we are in such an expensive and complex world, that of bringing drugs to market, we need to understand pharmaceutical companies, we call them pharma for short, because they may want to partner with us and both fund and lead our clinical development and then the marketing. And we have two experts, again, different perspectives. Leslie Stoltz works for J&J Innovation as vice president. She has many years of experience in putting deals together and can tell you what a big pharma company is looking for in a deal. And Pat Sinatra comes from the other side. She's from the small company side. She advises small companies. She will help them negotiate. So two very different perspectives who are going to tell you about the importance of partnering and what you need to do to get ready for it. The US healthcare system and regulation. Again, two people who have really interesting perspectives. Eyal Gurian used to be at a major insurer. Elevance changed the name from Anthem. Don't ask me why. We all knew what Anthem was. But anyway, he was VP of Care Transformation. He's now doing a startup himself. He can tell you how insurance companies work. And Elise Samian, also great background, is currently VP Regulatory Affairs for a Parkinson's startup company, and can tell you from the small company side what it takes to get reimbursement. And then we have entrepreneur stories. These are a couple of the stories from last year. We bring in people who are successful, who haven't always been successful, and they tell you how they got to the place they're at. And these are two people who've raised significant amounts of money. We have sector discussion groups led by mentors. Our mentors are the same kind of people who are the teachers. They're serial entrepreneurs, CEOs, investors, business development executives, consultants, and so on. This concept is we're going to take what could be a big lecture and break it down into the various sectors that we participate in life sciences. So therapeutics group, there's a diagnostics group, a med tech group, and a digital health group. That's where you're going to find people like you if you identify with one of those sectors. And it's a small discussion led by somebody who comes from that sector. And it's a great way to get your thoughts out on the table and your questions answered. All right, a few key facts. The class starts October 2nd. It's a 10-week class. You can expect to spend 2 to 4 hours per week, depending on how much effort you want to put in. We recommend that you at least come to the lectures, which are 2 hours a week. There are ways to catch up if you miss it, and the lectures are recorded. If you want to, in addition, go to the groups and office hours and do the readings and so on, you can spend more time. The time alternates so that different time zones have a chance to attend live. So we have half the lectures at 9 a.m. That's good for Europe, half at 5 p.m. That's good for Asia, and they both work for the United States. So we try to make this flexible for you. We have a really wonderful international alumni network. We've been on 6 continents, 37 countries. We have over 500 active alumni. We have virtual meetups. We have in-person meetups when there's a major event. And here is our alumni event at JP Morgan Healthcare Week. For those of you who know about this, it's in January. Basically, the entire world of healthcare business comes to San Francisco that week, and a lot of people are coming for some meetings around then. And then we always hold an event. This was from a couple of years ago. And this year, for the first time, we are giving out a completion certificate. So if you attend enough of the lectures, you will be eligible to get one of these certificates, which you can proudly put on your wall and tell people what you've accomplished. So Russ Ernst was in our last cohort. He's an entrepreneur in Boston. And I love his quote because he says he's blown away by the quality of people gathered in one place. The access you get is more than you could hope to do in years of networking, and you get it all in a 10-week span. We do make everything very accessible to you. All right, so we're about to introduce our student participant. Here is a way you can join the class. This is our 6th cohort coming up. Deadline for registration is August 30. And there's a link. I think we can also put that link in the chat, Inder, if you'll do that.
Yep.
And I see Caroline on the screen. Here she is, not on the screen too, on a different screen. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce to you today Caroline Schlacker, who is an MD, which she got while she was in the US Navy. A bit of a different background than many people we see. So very interesting to learn about her experience. She is on the UCSF faculty, and she was in our last cohort. So I'm going to, do I dare stop sharing? No, I'm going to keep this up. I actually leave this up for you. And let's give Caroline the podium. Caroline, tell us what class was like, and actually, I think I will stop the share so I can see the chat. And please do put your questions in the chat. Caroline, take it away. What was class like for you?
Class was awesome. Is my volume okay, everyone? Sounds
Yeah.
good? Okay, perfect.
I can hear you.
Awesome. So I was in the last cohort, and I am an otolaryngologist here at UCSF. I'm an MD. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a PhD. And so in some ways, the class seemed a little not aimed towards me, at least in terms of initial impression, because it really is so good at the sort of more biotech, healthcare science, like really helping people who speak the language of science and know they live in an ecosystem where that science can be translated into a product or a company, but aren't really sure where to go from it. And even though they might have great mentors, whether here at UCSF or another place from the science perspective, finding a mentor, finding a class that kind of introduces you to like the business side of things in terms of how to speak the language, what opportunities are there, is really like found in this class. And Stephanie is incredibly generous with her network. I mean, in terms of the people who come and lecture in this class, it's unbelievable. And then also too, she cultivates the network like for the students as well, like locally, you know, so it's not, you know, this part isn't the global part, but if you're in the area, you're always welcome. There's certainly like periodic alumni events where people who are at biopharma startups will host in different accelerators, different locations and meet up. There's global events. Stephanie will say, hey, I'm going to this conference. Anyone around in San Diego, somewhere overseas a couple months ago. And so really
Barcelona.
yeah, Barcelona, perfect. So, you know, it's just really like looking around and really kind of keeping this community engaged. There's a LinkedIn page as well, which you can join after you finish the class. But I'm on LinkedIn too. That's probably the best way to message me if you have specific questions. I would say in terms of the course, synchronous is definitely best. And I was not the best student from that perspective. My clinical responsibilities sort of got in the way of some of the classes, but the online availability of the courses was great. And in fact, at the very end, they're available for about 4 weeks afterwards, and then they come down. I watched everything. I watched everything again, like at 1.5x, and just taking all these notes and stuff. And so it was still a great resource, but I could have gotten so much more out of the course than I did if I'd gone to more synchronous lectures. And then I went to a few of the more offline, well, not recorded, but online small entrepreneur meetups and the smaller sessions, and they were all really great. Stephanie is also really available in terms of office hours. When I was in the course, I didn't have an idea. I have an idea now, but I was like, oh, office hours like really aren't for me, I don't think. Stephanie knew I hadn't signed up. She like wrote and she's like, hey, I really think, you know, all the students should take advantage of this. And she's absolutely right. And she's a great teacher. And she really keeps the class. She's so funny. She's a little like task oriented. And so we'll sometimes keep the speakers in line, sometimes keep people asking questions in line, and really kind of keeps things moving, and also really sets students up for success. You might have even noticed once or twice in this Zoom seminar right now, where someone has a question, she'll have the person ask. It develops your skill for like public speaking and posing things. I'm talking kind of fast, but I want to make sure that I hit everything. The one thing that I think this is really good for, and this is stealing from, I think Stephanie used the word perspective several times. It's like, it's a global class. And so from a global perspective, and also just from different industry perspective, it's like this class is instrumental in helping you understand perspectives that are not your own. So if you're a scientist, it will help with business. It will help with IP. It's like in the IP lecture, the guy's like, please, 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 for the love of God, stop putting blog posts up about your work before you get provisional patents. Now that's a paraphrase, but you know, there's different things where it really might not cross our minds in terms of the field that we're coming from. I would say this course is not going to teach you everything, but it certainly tells you like where you are, where you need to go. In some of the smaller sessions, it sort of sets you up for kind of maybe even making direct connections. Other times you might know what you need to read up on or learn. And so it's really great. And one thing I would recommend is that sometimes you really get an opportunity to say what you're working on, or if you do have an idea. I would say sometimes there's people who really try and like shoehorn their personal, they're very like individual questions in, and sometimes that isn't so applicable to the lectures, but sometimes even in the big lectures, there's a time for someone to like state their project. And so I would strongly recommend that if you are a founder, if you have an idea, that you have like a 1 to 2 sentence summary, and then also somewhat of an elevator pitch too. Because for example, when we talk about opportunity assessment, Steve is really into defining the problem. So when someone starts to go off on this like very long-winded tale of a solution that's already, in his opinion, maybe premature closure on exploring the problem, in a very nice way and in a very constructive way, we'll say, maybe you need to take a few steps back. So, you know, if you do have your position of where you are, I think it's important to know it and be able to like spit it out, because you might get a chance to present to one of the best people in the world who can really help steer you right. So that was me talking super fast. It really is a global class, by the way. In fact, I'll be honest, I was sort of hoping that it would help cultivate more of a UCSF network, like locally, but it's been fantastic because one, there are a fair number of UCSF scientists and physicians, but then I met a guy who is doing a hearing screening startup in in Finland, and he came here for, for a conference, and then I set him up with audiologists here. We had a gentleman from Myanmar who already was well on his way, I think, to his like third startup. We had a former FDA employee. We just had a real like kind of cornucopia of people throughout the US and certainly throughout the world. So I really encourage you to consider this course.
That's great, Caroline. Thank you so much. I had no idea what you were going to say, so I couldn't have written it better myself. There's a really good comprehensive review of what it's like. Let's take a couple of questions, and there are not many in the chat, so please do add it to the chat. Carlos, do you want to ask your question live? Carlos Gomez.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a better sense of what the course is like. And I am curious because I'm coming from like a bachelor's in microbiology, but I am interested in like startups and how to begin a startup. But I'm just curious to like what extent would like or someone that's coming in with like a bachelor's, how would that educational background play in like the success in the course and in terms of like starting or like working on starting a business as well?
Caroline, why don't you take that?
I think this class is for all levels, and so you'll sort of find what you need. Like it was sort of funny in one of the classes in like healthcare, like introduction to U.S. healthcare. Like some of the European class members who like thought they knew were just like, oh my gosh, this is like crazy complicated. And other courses or other sessions that might not seem super applicable, like to me, for example, as an MD, like the partnering one, like talking about small pharma startups, working with like bigger industry, it was still incredibly interesting. So I don't know enough about your, individual idea to give you like specific information, but one thing Stephanie does is I think keep the outline and keep everything on task. She's also really good at telling people to like define their acronyms, whether it's the speaker, whether it's students. And so you don't need a doctorate if that's what you're asking. You don't need a master's degree. Startups were started by high school dropouts. So I don't think formal education is really important in terms of being successful in this course. Stephanie, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You just have to want to learn, Carlos, be open to learning. Being a good entrepreneur has a lot to do with just your basic personality, who you are, and whether you're comfortable in the role of being an entrepreneur. That's not an educational thing. You can go back and pick up the education as you proceed. And, I know people who are entrepreneurs who decide, wow, I better take, a business class and understand more about finance or some such thing. But yeah, you can absolutely do a startup where you're from and try to make it work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Okay, other questions? I know someone wanted to know, Caroline, you can answer that live. Wanted to know, what are you doing a startup?
No, but I do have an idea. I just came to UCSF 2 years ago, so my goal is not to leave academia right away unless something really radically changes, which could always happen. But I was just blown away. Stephanie has like incredible academic background, and then at one of the mixers, I was like, Stephanie, what's your goal in this class? And she's like, to get people to leave academia. Like she wants to empower
Did
people.
I say that?
You did. That's actually a direct quote.
Oh, dear.
But I'm like, the Stanford and UC Berkeley and UCSF know this. But no, she has great respect for academics, and sometimes like she or even the speakers are like, hey, there is nothing wrong with remaining a basic scientist or pursuing your postdoc, or like she said earlier, going to a bigger company or going to Gen Tech. Like that's totally fine. It's kind of nice to know another ecosystem, even if you choose never to participate in it. But it is something where you can understand the resources of your university and academia and then venture out whenever. And also that focus on not being academia, I think also opens this course up to people not at universities.
Do you want to ask your question? If you're still there, Kin?
Oh, yes. My name is Joan.
Hey, Joan, do you want to put on your camera while you ask it? Okay, there you are. That's a UCSF background. I recognize it. Okay.
Yeah. Currently, I'm an associate researcher at UCSF, and I'm in academia, and my mentor is a professor. So we are thinking to start a company together. So my question is, have I leave the academia totally, or can I just do it during or like at the same time, or when should I leave? Thank you.
So, yeah, good question, very relevant. So the answer is it depends. So if you want to be a founder but not be the CEO or CSO, that's fine. You can found as, and we have many academics at UCSF who've started multiple companies. And that's what they do. They never leave UCSF, but they keep on spinning out their ideas, and they find someone like a postdoc who might want to go leave and start the company. If you want to take on the role of CEO or CSO, you would have to leave. I think you're allowed to do it for a limited amount of time, but basically it's not compatible with your academic job. And it's a very full-time job anyway, but it's a conflict. So that's why it depends. Depending what you want to do and how much involvement you want in the company itself. You can always be on the board. You can be, as I said, you can be a founder if that's appropriate. Okay. Great. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left. Let's see, any other questions? Yeah, any last questions for us? Everything is fair game. So while I'm waiting to see if any other questions materialize, I just want to remind you. Oh, okay, Tanya, go ahead and ask. Tanya, are you there? And by the way, everybody, this is the way I run the class. I have people ask their question. They put it in the chat first, then they get to ask it live. And then, then they get to engage with whoever the speaker is. So I don't know where Tanya's gone to, but yes, you can, it's very common to get an SBIR grant to get you started in a company. It's a really excellent way to do it because a grant is not dilutive. They're not taking equity, and it's a way to forward your science and start building a commercial plan on the government's dime. So it's a good thing. Okay, well, we are just out of time. I just want to remind everybody that if you're interested in the class, think about signing up. I expect we're going to have a big group this time. And I am excited to know that. I just came back from a big conference and in Bio conference where I met with a lot of people, and also Bio Europe. I'm going to be at Bio Asia next month. So bringing the word around the world. And we're going to have a very interesting cohort. If you have any questions, send them to me or Inder Takar, who's been sending you chats. Inder is our program manager and can be very helpful as well. So thank you for coming, and I will stick around in case anyone wants to ask a question outside of this more formal meeting. And thank you for your participation.